stand to my feet now because Queen, do I need to stand up now? And there you go.
Good afternoon.
Well,
good afternoon to you.
Afternoon back to you.
Happy November 1st. And hopefully you all fell backwards gracefully, right?
We did. I did.
Did you fall backwards, Dad? You fall back?
Gracefully. Did you fall back gracefully?
Yes. Yes.
I did. I didn't, and everybody in this house knows it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah. At the time. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think.
Yeah.
Come on, Dad. I showed you, but that's all right. Y'all grown now. Y'all do what y'all want to do. So here we are. If I'm not mistaken, this is season 2, episode 12 of Chatting with the Clays, and we're excited. We know this is a big week coming up related to our presidential elections, and I know you two as leaders have the disposition and the reverence and the discipline to avoid of influencing those that are impressionable with your political beliefs. So although we recognize that we are coming up on Tuesday, election day, I wanted to be sensitive to recognize, at least for our viewing audience, that we know how important this day is. We certainly encourage everyone to vote. Dad, you had a wonderful encouragement video on Facebook for folks to get out and vote. But I also wanted to honor what you all make your practice, which is to not persuade or sway or influence those that are impressionable, connected to you all, with any specific political leaning discussion. But as all things, we're prayerful. As all things, we encourage us as children of God and citizens of this world to fulfill our duties. And with all things, we want to be mindful to pray for our country and pray for our world, as we want the process to be as peaceful and as productive and as purposeful as it can be according to God's will. So I just wanted to open up and recognize that. I wouldn't want anyone to see this episode and say, do you all not realize that there's an election going on? But that's you all's practice, which I highly respect, that you stay out of influencing those that are impressionable. So with that being said, and with the white elephant being chased out of the room, I wanted to move into the topic for this week, which actually was in my plans supposed to be the topic last week, but you all turned the tables on me. So this week would be focused on what I call the worship mentality. Mm-hmm. The worship mentality. And just to frame things a little bit, when we think about the worship mentality, if we take in context St. John, the 4th chapter, the 24th verse, where in NIV, there's a recognition here by our author, which I think we all sort of carry and maybe define for ourselves. But God is a spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the spirit and in truth. Mm-hmm. And the worship mentality, I think, is really important for a couple of reasons. One, we know earlier this year, we lost a basketball savant, one of the greatest athletes that we've seen in our time, Kobe Bryant. And Kobe Bryant passing tragically along with his daughter in a helicopter crash, sort of sparked the world, not only in reflection and mourning and remembrance of just a great talent on and off the basketball court, but also something that Kobe Bryant coined, which I believe was amplified as we've been honoring his memory, which is as they call it, Mamba mentality, which Kobe Bryant will call the Mamba mentality. And Mamba mentality is just kind of a pop culture term, essentially talking about excellence, dedication, competitive spirit, discipline. Those are things that Kobe Bryant embodied. And that's what is represented in the Mamba mentality, which he has communicated in various forms. But we know he's authored children's books, short films, and again, with his legacy and mentorship, I think a lot of people think about the Mamba mentality. But the worship mentality is something that also is connected to 2020, just as the Mamba mentality has been elevated with Kobe Bryant's legacy. The worship mentality, I think, has been elevated during this pandemic. Why? Because we haven't been able to worship the same ways that we have in the past. And no matter what your discipline is as a person, no matter which ways you worship, we all can agree that our worship has changed as a result of the pandemic directly. We have not been able to gather in the ways that we used to gather. We haven't had the accompaniments that we're used to, the choir, the praise teams, the musicians, and we've had to find a way to connect with what our traditional forms of worship are in a different way. And then also, because of this pandemic, we have another reason to reverence God and reflect upon who he is and bestow honor upon him. Being God, he's so many different things to us, but he reveals himself even in circumstances. So I use that to set up today's conversation about the worship mentality. Now, if we go by definition, and my question is just around the corner, worship commonly in the way that we recognize it in English would be a reverent honor, homage paid to God, or a sacred personage, or we could consider it formal or ceremonious rendering of such honor and homage. So we worship God as an expression of reverence and honor and homage that we pay to God. So let me just open the first question to the two of you. And we know what the obvious is as it relates to the pandemic and us not being able to gather in the ways that we have. But in what ways have the two of you observed worship changing in 2020?
Well, like I said, I think really you just really covered it in saying because we have not been able to gather, and that is part of our worship, the coming together to worship the Lord. And because we have not been able to physically come together, that physical connection is greatly missed. And, I mean, I can't be in the homes of people, so I don't know what they're feeling in their homes. But I know in the building, when we're here in the building, and just pretty much it's been 8 of us that have been in the building. And that's really the 8 essential people that it takes to make the services happen. Just to fill the void of the people coming together to worship, because you're used to that interaction. And there's usually, especially in the Pentecostal churches, there's a call and response. And the call and response is more than verbal even. So, there's an action and a reaction to what goes on. So I think that void is really felt. But on the flip side of that, I have found myself saying many times during the pandemic, I'm glad I know God for myself. Because even though you miss that physical contact, I still don't miss talking to God, because I talk to God anyway, and I talk to him in the morning when I rise. I talk to him throughout the day. I talk to him as I'm going to sleep throughout the night. The Lord, if he wakes me you know, with somebody in my spirit, you know, saying pray for them, and you know, I'm constantly talking to them. So I have that fellowship or that worship with him anyway. But just that collective worship that we have with the people, it is greatly missed, and it leaves a void there because you want to be able to gather, you want to see the response of the people. Mm-hmm. And that's what.
Absolutely. Dad, take us forward to a separate point. Give me a different example of a way that worship has changed in 2020.
Okay, if I get the change, and unless worship is, unless our heart is ready, worship is really meaningless. When you look at Exodus, and then I'll get to that point. You look at Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. It was not anything corporate, but the key verse is verse 5. It tells Moses, don't come any closer. He said, take off your sandals, for the place where you're standing on is holy ground. Corporate worship, and then it comes in and is taught to the people through Moses' book of Leviticus. Corporate worship begins or comes into play after, or not play, but in service after the individual embraces worship. That came first with Moses. And when you said that, and I was thinking, for the true worshipers, it has not changed. The setting has not changed. The placement for corporate worship has changed. But worship begins with the individual when the hearts are ready. I was listening to what your mother said. She says, I begin worship in the morning. And so you're already ready. Now, from your question is, how has the pandemic changed? It has, the corporate setting has changed for worship, but the individual, they that worship me must worship me in spirit and in truth. That's that individual person. What has changed is the corporate setting. When we come together to worship corporately together, that has changed. But the individuals had to bring their heart that was ready for worship together to make worship meaningful. Unless, again, our hearts are ready for worship, is meaningless. But when I come on Sunday morning, and as we're live streaming, and when I look out and I see the empty pews, excluding those that are running the engineers behind the scenes, I pull on myself to realize it's God. And I'm here still in the face of God. And so my worship has not changed. What I've had to do was change how I perceive my worship and the worship, because I'm not in a corporate setting. So the change came, and I think it was good. The change came, which is good because it takes us back to the beginning of individual worship. And a corporate worship without God is no worship at all. So I think the change is how we do it. And with this pandemic, I think it's the collective body together in a corporate worship that has changed. And that mentally, to me, it was a mental adjustment, not saying I had to readjust my worship. It's just in how it refers back to an individual flowing it out to a corporate, if that makes any sense.
Indeed, and I think one of the things that becomes really important here becomes two vantage points, right? The individual worship certainly carries with you throughout the week, whether you're worshiping on Monday and you know you're not going to be in the church setting outside the pandemic until later in the week, or if you're talking about Sunday morning, you know, and you began worship earlier before morning worship service, you know, in a facility in the house of God, you know, then you begin in the morning and maybe it carries throughout your Sunday in the way that you experience it. But, you know, the other piece, and I get the vantage point of being on the other side, right? Where I have been in a church facility for a Sunday worship, right? You know, what becomes interesting to me for the audience is worship has to be now more intentional because you don't have the structure of a service to lean on. You don't have the opportunity to say, okay, I'm gonna do my private worship in this way, and then on Sunday I'm walking into an environment where worship, you know, has been structured, you know, into the experience. And I know, you know, we say a lot of different things, and we say, oh, well, you know, program subject to change, you know, and we say, well, you know, I shouldn't have to, you know, get you riled up and pumped and primed to worship God when we're actually in the church building. But the truth is, we all count on a worship experience. Otherwise, we would not congregate in the house of God together. So we do count and depend on a structure, if you will, for worship to occur within at least, you know, the hours of the service times. We'll say that's the structure. Maybe, you know, you start worship in the prayer, maybe it's somewhere else, you know, within the agenda or the program, but at least the structure of, I know I'm going to be in the house of God during this window of time, and I'll be able to, without disturbing my neighbors, without disturbing my coworkers, without disturbing, you know, folks on the street, I'll be able to worship within this context. So now you have to be much more intentional. And I know I'm answering my own question because,
well, you know, if I can interject,
please.
Actually, that's where I was going to go next and really talk about our structure of worship. You know, we're missing that, and actually, you said the same words that, you know, I was thinking that, you know, a lot of times we say, well, you know, program subject to change. This is God's church, this is God's program, and things like that. But we're used to a certain structure. And we really, if you let me take it outside of the spiritual realm for a second, but we really glean energy from one another when we come into the building, you know, and right. Then, you know, we know the spiritual part of it, that we, you know, spiritually, when we're together, you know, that, you know, we get that spiritual boost from one another when we're in the room. So, you know, it's really an adjustment, and it really, I mean, I have watched services online before, and, you know, it's like you can feel the spirit of God through the service. It really was a powerful service. But for the most part, you're just watching a service. And it takes really a different mind frame to, you know, to really latch into that, you know, really zone into that person that you're watching versus being in the actual setting with them, you know. So right. That's a big transition. And We say, take the Lord along with you everywhere you go. He's in my home and I can do, but you don't. And I think you hit the nail on the head. You don't do the same type of praise in your home than you would do in this, in the building. I mean, we get happy at home, but it's still a difference. It's still a difference.
Yeah, 1,000%. And what really becomes interesting is the same, and I love, and I'm baiting you all as always, but connected to a point both that Dad made and the point that you just left off on, I'll merge the 2 points. In a way, it hasn't changed, and in almost the same way it has changed, right? There are those that will come into a worship service, come to the house of God, and we refer to them as spectators, where they really sit with an audience mindset, and they're watching and they're listening to see what songs are saying and how well they're saying, and listening to see how well the songs are played, and they are cognizant and reacting to what's happening in the room with other people. And that's okay. And this is the thing about these conversations. I want to get into the stuff that's real, right? Not just the topic layer. It is okay that I might come into the service and maybe I'm not in the mental place where I'm completely free. My mind is on a matter or an issue and in some other place. And it is completely okay that I can come into a service and someone can provoke me and inspire me to lock into worship, right? Sometimes it's that singer, and the singer sings with such a conviction that now you're really listening to the lyrics and your mind is reflecting on things that you've gone through, things you're going through in your life. And I am totally okay with admitting sometimes the singer has ushered me into worship because they sing with a conviction. They sing where the anointing of God has connected to them and their expression and their relationship with him. And that comes out in a sound. And sometimes we don't recognize that relationship can come out in the sound and in the worship. Same thing with the musicians playing. The musicians and their relationship and their experience with God can come out through their playing. Yes, it has to do with talent and skill. All of those things are a part of it. But then when that relationship is there, then the anointing of God can fall on the musicians. And just by listening, again, you may capture my attention and you may inspire me to enter into a deeper place of worship. And I'm okay admitting that being in church can do that for you, right? But sometimes it's me. Sometimes I'm the one who's locked in and everybody else isn't locked in, or the musicians aren't locked in, or the worship leaders aren't locked in, and I'm just already in that place. And it may be that effect of someone connecting to the way I'm worshiping, right? And that might pull them. So I'm okay with that influence because we are strengthened by gathering ourselves together. So that is supposed to happen, and that's okay. Everybody wants to always act like they're the self-starter, right? And they don't need anybody to pull them along. But I'll tell you what, if it's only me, I've been in places where I needed to be amongst other people because I wasn't as locked in as I needed to be. And coming around other people gave me the strength because I was inspired and moved, and that's okay. So now that we're not actually in the building in the service, and I can't count on that, I have to count on me at all times, right? Because if I don't tune into the service, if I don't, play the music, if I don't meditate in my heart, if I don't really open myself up to not just spending an hour reading chapters of God's word, and if I'm not really trying to honor God and really pay homage to him by spending time in the word and in prayer, if I don't put that effort forth, there's not anybody that's going to drag me along, right? And I'm saying as an individual. So in some ways, it has changed and hasn't changed because we do still rely on that individual dedication. And then we do, in many ways, miss when that individual dedication and effort isn't there. And somebody naturally among us, if we were in service, will pull us along. Now we have to do that almost full time and be much more intentional if we're actually worshiping.
Get, this is still with your first question. We have to, well, we're combining worship and praise.
I'm just talking about worship.
Yeah. And so when we do worship, if you first go back, you go back again and you look at worship is that individual person to God. Moses, take off your shoes. You're standing on holy ground. Moses is in the place of worship. And the worship comes as individual. If you look at it, we constantly, before even this COVID-19, we constantly would encourage people, don't wait till you get here to get into a worship mode, but be prepared before you get here. Prepare yourself before you get here. And then let's unite collectively, like you're talking about, because this is so powerful. And through all of this pandemic, it has really given the true believers the time to sharpen up our skills and the things that we really should do before God. Remember the scripture says, and I'm trying to remember, I'm not clear with it, but anyway, forsake not the assembling.
That's Hebrews.
Yep.
10.
Okay. Forsake not the assembling of ourselves together, because some have.
10 and 25, not forsaking the assembly of ourselves together as the manner of some is.
Now, as the manner of some is. Do you not know we say that? And before this pandemic, there were some people that were really straddling the fence. They weren't faithful in coming to church. They wasn't faithful. And when they did come, they came like it was a chore. They wasn't in the mood of worship. They just came. But now we see the benefits. And you're talking about the benefits physically coming together and praising God together, coming together, bringing our strength and praising God together. So we have worship and we have praise.
So let me pull a layer back, if I can interject. I want to peel a layer back. I want to go deeper here. So what we started with my question one was both addressing essentially the expression of worship,
right,
and the inspiration of worship, right? How do we express worship? And then how are we inspired to express worship? Now, another layer deeper, and you said this, and this is why I wanted to interject to pull this layer deeper. Worship isn't just in song.
Correct.
Worship isn't just in lifting hands.
Correct.
Worship isn't just in mental reflection and meditation, right? There are other forms of worship. And I wanted to introduce a question and then also some stoking suggestions for ways that we can have, again, that worship mentality. Because I think if we only focus on the service, then we lean into the expression of worship and we miss the totality of worship. And you were talking about this, Dad, because worship is personal. And it's not just before you go into a service, and it's not just when you're listening to songs or when you're singing songs. There's other areas of our life that are connected to worship. So let me provoke to you all some suggestions, And if you could, as you hear the suggestion, elaborate. How do we worship God in our stewardship? How does that contribute to our worship mentality, our steward?
Numbers chapter 28, verses 1 and 2. And the one was offerings. One were offerings. Under the supervision of the priests, and Numbers, I told you about Leviticus. The people had to be taught worship. And one of the first, if my mind serves me correct, and I'm reaching back in study, one of the first preparations beside that initial experience that Moses had, from Moses' experience at the foot of Mount Sinai, brought it to, and the instruction from God as he set up the nation who God picked out. He dealt with them with stewardship. Stewardship is one of the initial preparations for worship. Stewardship. And stewardship comes from an all experience of how grateful that you are, because stewardship comes from having God lending you things, and you are required to be a steward and to present them things back to God the way he's placed into you.
Yes,
so
sir.
One of that is stewardship. Do you not know that you cannot worship? Oh, well, praise be to God. You can't worship God without true stewardship.
Yes, sir.
I pass it.
And actually, I'm gonna give Mom a different one. Let me also offer up Hebrews the 13th chapter and the 16th verse. And do not forget to do good and to share with others, for with such sacrifices, God is pleased. He is honored. And that is within the definition of worship, honoring God. So, and do not forget to do good and to share with others, for such sacrifices, with such sacrifices, God is pleased. That's Hebrews, the 13th chapter in the 16th verse. Mom, let's go, and we talked about it a little bit, but can you speak about how prayer and meditation, because you opened up with this one, is a form of worship?
Well, again, I think, again, we have to go back to our definition of what worship is, and understanding that it's a reverence and honor, and you have to, there's no other way about it. I think reverent is interchangeable with respect. If you don't respect that thing that you're worshiping, you won't worship it. That's all there is to it. You can't worship something you don't respect or honor. And God is honorable, period. And so when we don't learn that, when we don't get that from the beginning, we lose what worship really means. And to worship God, even like I said, even through prayer and fasting, you understand, we loosely use having a relationship with God. But again, when you have a relationship with something, there is a respect that goes with it. When you don't have a respect for the thing you have relationship with, you can't worship it. So, and the way you honor God through worship is you talk to him, you pray to him. You can't have a relationship if there's no communication.
Mm-hmm.
And so you learn that early before you get, because again, I think we start out with the scripture in John 4:31, they that worship him must worship him in spirit and truth.
Right.
God is a spirit. So there's no other way that you can worship the spirit without having that relationship and talking to them, because how will you know God? You can't see him. So there has to be some kind of communication with him.
Mm-hmm.
So that prayer, again, that's that acknowledgement that I acknowledge who God is from the beginning. And because I acknowledge you, I'm going to talk to you, and I'm going to get an understanding of what you like, God, of what you want, God, of what you will have for me to do. We talked about that stewardship. Stewardship is just responsibility. How do you know what you're responsible to God for if you're not talking to him? So I think, again, we have to go right back to the beginning of really what worship really means. If you don't honor God, if you don't reverence God, you can't worship God.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I got a couple more points to get to there, and I want you to help me get there.
Okay.
So
let me just add 2 words.
Yes, sir.
And all.
Yeah. See that you're stepping in my
right.
step. See, now you're stepping in my step. I told you I'm gonna get there. Let me drive. Okay. So we talked about worshiping through stewardship, which is the way that we manage what God has given us and the way that we give. We talked about the worship and prayer and meditation, spending time to communicate with God and to learn and to know God. I'm gonna throw another on the table, Dad, and then Mom, you may need to jump in on this one as well, because it's a big talking point and topic. Worship through discovery, right? And I'll just probe you with a couple things specifically, because I don't want to lose too much of the direction here. But one way Adam worshiped God is God charged Adam to name everything that was under his charge. God didn't just put Adam in charge of the garden. He gave Adam the instruction to name it. And by taking time to name everything, that was an expression of worship to God, for example, right? But when I say worship and discovery, and I promise I'm going to pose this back to the question, one thing that I think we don't do a good job talking about is our responsibility to discover God's creation, to discover nature, to discover the world, to interact with people of different cultures, different backgrounds, different languages. I believe, and I think you would agree, that this is a form of worship because discovery is a part of respecting the big and great God that he is. You can't say, on Mom's point, that you have a relationship with a person and you don't discover. So you can't worship a person that you don't discover and still have a relationship. That doesn't happen. And, in that example, I could say to you all, Mom, Dad, I met this woman named Karen and she's amazing. Oh yeah? Tell me something about her. Oh, well, she's a woman. She's brown skinned, love her. It don't sound like it, right? It's spending time to say how she thinks, what she likes, what she dislikes, where she's from, who she's connected to, who she wants to become, what her goals are, what her fears are, what her insecurities are, what some of her proclivities are. That level of getting to know and relationship building and discovery is the point I'm getting to, is a form of worship, because when I can tell you everything that I can tell you, then you would say, oh, he worships his wife, he loves his wife, and vice versa. We could spend time, I bought a car. Okay, what kind of car did you get? Oh, it was a black car. Okay, what about it? Got 4 wheels. It doesn't seem like I love it much. Doesn't seem like I worship it much, right? So in some instances, we do apply that attitude toward worshiping other things where we spend so much time, getting to know all those intricate details and obsessing over it. But to your point of relationship and now to the point of discovery, how is discovery a form of worshiping God? And I just laid a little bit because I didn't want that to be too vague, Dad. But how are we charged, and what do you believe is God's expectation on us to worship through discovery?
I was going, and as you was talking, I was going over to Matthew chapter 2, and I just picked up a couple of verses. I was looking at the Magi, and they were astrologers.
Mm-hmm.
That time of them traveling, when they saw this star, unique, they studied the elements. So many prophecies, so many things that came to pass, but they were really the stargazers. This particular star, it intrigued them to the point that they left everything, family, and everything that they was associated with, did this humongous travel. They traveled across the land masses to discover this little baby in a manger that they had no connection with. And when they got there, now the preparation for them, gold, frankincense, and they had gifts. They discovered the awesomeness of God. They discovered God in the flesh. And the travel time that it took them to get there, researchers are still trying to pin down how long it actually took them to get to where Jesus was. One thing we know, they had more than one birthday, all three of them. Took them a while to get there. They were in the mode of discovery. Hallelujah, Jesus. Do you not know worship will take you to the place where you will discover really the God of the Bible? In times like these, listen, watch this, and I'll pass this on. Where I was thinking? Well, I'm gonna tell you what I was thinking. I'm thinking those that are incarcerated behind the prison walls for whatever reason. Do you not know that there's been so many have discovered Jesus Christ in the penitentiary? They are secluded. They're on lockdown. They only get to go out and see the sun. Everything is governed through a short length of time, and then they are locked up where we're thinking that we can't go and have places, and I kept running with this in my mind as you're talking. And when Paul said, I'm a prisoner of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, he's discovering he's not his own. If you're incarcerated, and we talk about, well, we can't go around people, we can't be. I cannot think about how it feels to be in a, whatever the dimensions are of a cell block, and I can't get to my family because I'm locked up. Seclusion, whether it's physically or mentally, it can position you in a place of discovery of really who God, the God of the Bible. Well, praise Jesus.
Absolutely. And to the point of discovering, there's something that's unifying when you do discover. We all are in different jobs and careers, and we live in different states, and maybe we've come to different states. We've traveled to different parts of the world. There's different things that are our passions. Some people are really into music. Some people are into athletic competition. Some people into exercise. There's all sorts of discovery that can happen. There are people who are worshiping God by doing death-defying feats, where they push their body and their mind to different capacities. And I think we look at those things and we say, is that really worship? Because you're walking across a tightrope that stretched across Times Square in New York. Before those people, they found a way to worship God by pushing beyond their limits and saying, God, I'm trusting and believing in you to help me accomplish something that I'm fearful of, accomplish something that extends beyond my comprehension. And I've grown closer to you because you've shown me, I've discovered through what you've shown me that you can heal a person who is fearful, a person who's insecure, a person, who maybe started that journey as weak and has been able to push beyond their pain tolerance and beyond their anxieties. There's all sorts of ways that through discovery we found worship, but it's unifying because even go back to Solomon's temple. By no coincidence do we find a temple that has architecture, structures, furniture, accessories that come from all over the world. The cedars of Lebanon, you have gold, you have silk, you have precious silvers, precious metals, you have scents that are connected to the incense that go up. It's really interesting how the house of God, as it was articulated in Solomon's temple, had components of so many different parts of the world, right? Because as Solomon has traveled and people under Solomon's leadership traveled, they found the finest things that God has left in the earth for us to discover. And as homage and honoring God, they brought the finest things that they've discovered God has left in the earth, and they brought them into the house of God to point it back to him and say, God, you did this. We've never seen wood like this. We've never seen gold that shines like this. We've never seen silver, which they were using to make some of their cups and some of their vessels, out of, the silks. And again, just some of the spices and the herbs that they use to create the incense. All of that is a reflection of discovery, right? And it's all a part of the house of God. So when we sit together in the house of God and we sing a song, it's not odd or strange for a person to testify and say, God kept my mind while I was in the penitentiary. I was at one point in the hospital, unable to move, unable to walk. It's interesting how all those things, just like Solomon's temple, come back together inside the house of God, and they show the discovery of a big and great God. So I do believe, even from what we're saying now, that discovery is a part of the worship. Think about Job, how even he reflected to God all of the creatures out there. Now, he was really complaining, but when he even started throwing out all of the creatures throughout creation that were great and wonderful and mighty and unique, and bringing all those things back before God, honors a big and great God. But anyway, with all that being said, there was one more point I wanted to get to. And it's something that we say, and my endeavor is to just pull the layers back, because I believe all of this comes together for a worship mentality. And it's not just the singing and the expression that we think we're missing in the pandemic, but it's all of these ingredients that can come together to put our minds in that worship mentality. And it really will improve and strengthen us in the area of worship in our life. How do we honor or worship God with our life? That is something we say in church. That is something that you hear thrown out there. And I just really want to pull the layers back for the audience to talk about what that really specifically means for an individual. How do we worship God or honor God with our life?
There's two people biblically that come to mind, and then, I'll speak in natural. But I thought about Samuel. And now we're talking about discovery still. Samuel, when God was calling Samuel, he didn't know the voice of God yet. And he kept saying, he kept going to Eli and say, did you call me? Did you call me? And you talked about ushering people into knowing how to worship. And the last time Eli told Samuel, he said, go back. And the next time you hear it, call, say, yes, Lord. Here I am, Lord. I'm listening. Your servant will listen. And that was the beginning of the little boy's discovery into worship. Because from that point, when he said, here am I, Lord.
Yes.
He acknowledged God.
That's good. That's good.
And he began to discover who God really was, because after he said, here am I, Lord, then he told him, your servant will listen.
Yeah.
So there he began to really worship God, because then he knew who God, the voice of God. And then that relationship with God began, because before he had the relationship with Eli. That's the reason why he thought it was Eli talking to him. He didn't have the relationship with God.
Don't stop there. You keep it up and add on to it. He was being taught,
Yes, that's
how to take care of the things of God, but did not know God.
And that's what I was saying. He was taught
Don't
the
stop.
discovery,
Yeah.
and then his responsibility, his stewardship.
Yes.
That responsibility
Yes.
to God.
Oh my God.
And
yes.
the second person I thought about was Anna. She was found in the temple doing what? Worshiping, talking to God.
About Anna.
You know, learning all about who God really was. She learned that God was that void of her husband missing. You know, she learned that God, you know, through that, all the things that God would become to her. But she could not learn that unless she depended or worshiped God by being in the temple, talking to him. Now for her, she had to be in the temple for whatever reason. She may have distractions or whatever, but spending that time with God to find out who God is and what he has for you to do. And I think you come back, pose that question one more time, because I really got lost with these two when you were talking.
That's
because
good.
I thought about, you know, those were your two perfect examples. I know.
Yeah, how you worship and how you honor God with your life.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean to an individual?
And what it really means to, and again, first, honoring God, respecting who God really is. And knowing that if you respect God for who he really is, for being this almighty creator who created you, who holds the power of life and death in his hand, when you really think about that, you can't hold a match or anything else to it. When you really think about that, that makes you tremble. It makes you fear God in the sense that you know that anything he says, your life hinges upon it. Be it good or bad, be it live or die. God is that great that your whole life hinges on it. And I think you talked about something that struck a chord. I remember when I broke my ankle. I actually broke my foot off. They said it was broken off. The doctor had to put it back on with the plate, pins, and screws and everything. And I had never been, even after having 3 babies, I'd never been in that kind of pain before in my life. And for me, because you were saying how people honor God with their lives in different ways. For me, it was honorable for me to depend on God. Now, somebody else might say, oh, that's stupid. They give you stuff for pain, you take it. But I said, God, I don't want to be addicted. That was big with me. I don't want to be addicted to pain pills. And the kind of pain that I was in, it would have been easy, because when I would wake up, all I wanted to do was be out of pain. I remember at one time, I just said, Lord, I just want to sleep. I don't even want to wake up. I don't want to die, but I don't want to wake up, because I didn't want to feel this pain. But for me, just it was for me to keep my temple, my body as pure as I can. So, and that's the reason why I don't take a lot of pain pills now, because I fear I don't want to become addicted. So for me, that was my worship to God, to say, Lord, I really trust you to take this pain away. But if I say I trust you and then I take pain meds, for me, that was a violation of what I had said to God. Now, like you said, everybody's different. You know, they may have wanted to conquer the fear by doing the tightrope, but mine was conquering through, Lord, I'm going to trust you to take the pain. I'm going to trust you to heal me from this pain, because I didn't want to take the pain pills.
Absolutely. And you make such an excellent point, because God makes us all so unique and gives us unique callings and opportunities in our lives. We really can honor God in our lives by putting him first and by depending on him, and then by putting our excellence to what he has given us. I believe it's 1 Corinthians that speaks to how we honor him by what we do, right? It is really, really critical that we see those opportunities, because I know that's a part of what we are called to do. Because for every person that works in the temple, there's a person that God has elsewhere in the field. You know, there's a Cornelius out there, a centurion. You know, there are tax collectors, there are publicans, there are Luke the physicians out there, you know, who God has called to push themselves to excellence, depending on him, as opposed to cheating and gaming the system, as opposed to paying off and paying their way through promotion and advancement, as opposed to depending on those other things. God has those of us who accept the challenge to be in position to give him glory and honor. And what more honorable to say, listen, it is the Lord's doing, right? What more honorable to say, I have overcome adversity to accomplish the things that I've accomplished because of God, right? When so many ways the enemy tempts people to take the glory, right? And we would look at it and say, look at all the things that people accomplish without God. Oh no, it's still God, because he reigns on the just and he reigns on the unjust. The difference is, do we give him the credit? Because people are robbing God of his credit. Every professional athlete, every artist, every person who can sing and they're hard of hearing, every person who can paint and they can't see. I've seen blind artists paint upside down, turn it around, and it's a beautiful painting that I can't do with two eyes and all of what I think are abilities, right? But what God has charged us to do is actually to point attention and glory and honor back to his name by us pursuing and achieving excellence. And that is another way that we can honor God with our life. And I think sometimes we miss that, and I believe, not only is that another form of stewardship, but I believe that it is those platforms that God has created, and he's waiting for someone to answer the call, because there are plenty of people on the platforms right now, but he's waiting for someone to get to that platform to give him glory for it, and I think that's something else that we miss. But with just about 3 minutes left, I just wanted to also acknowledge song and worship as an expression through song. Even though we kind of started from that at the beginning, I did want to come around to it. And this is just kind of maybe a fun piece to sort of end this segment. What are some of the songs you all personally go to or you find yourself going to in your worship? Give us a quick playlist. If we're entering this week and we're just like many people flipping through our phone or flipping through YouTube, and we're trying to put something on that just brings our mind and brings our hearts to worship, what are some of the songs just off the top of your head that whenever you hear it, you connect with it and it brings you into a worship mentality?
Oh, I was gonna say, now my playlist is probably old too.
That's all right. Some of that we need.
I think it was my pastor's favorite song, but it always takes me into that worship mentality. Give him the glory, give him the praise. And because, you know, the song goes on to say, did he wake you up this morning? Did he start you on your way? You know, and so that's one of my, you know, give him the glory, give him the praise.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Just fire off a couple quick ones for me. We're ending out of time here.
I love the Lord, and I don't, and I won't take it back. And then my other one is I love you, Lord, and I lift my voice to worship you.
Yeah. Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Just shoot me a couple quick ones, Dad.
Sweet Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
All glory and honor belongs to God.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. I just drew a blank. Pick it up, First Lady.
That's two. I'll throw a couple in here just to give some contemporary, maybe newer flavor, but I do love all those songs that you all talked about. So let's not write those ones off either, because they'll take you right on in. Show Yourself Strong is a song I love by Fred Hammond. There's a song, I Love You, Jesus, by Lamar Campbell. Both of those are older ones, but if you want something that's pretty fresh and pretty new, there's a song called Excess Love by Daryl Walls. That is just a beautiful, beautiful worship song that just takes me in. So I just wanted to end there just with a few worship songs. You can type in the chat if you're watching this. You can write it in the comments on the YouTube channel. Throw out some of your songs. Let's develop a worship playlist just to encourage one another this week. This is going to be a very, very important week as it relates to the election, and we are still in a pandemic, and there are many families who are hurting from losses and sicknesses of loved ones and families. There are people that are still, laid off, furloughed, still unemployed. There are people that are going through all sorts of things. There have been divorces during this pandemic. People have lost loved ones to senseless acts of violence during this pandemic. There are people who have been incarcerated and loved ones who they haven't been able to see incarcerated during this pandemic. There's folks who are incarcerated who haven't been able to attend the funerals of some of their loved ones. There are all sorts of things that are going on in this world in addition to the election coming up. And we need to really get to a place where we have a worship mentality in our stewardship, in our expression, in our songs, in our prayer and meditation, and in ways that we honor God with our lives. So, again, let's encourage one another. My son is going to come in here in a second and worship with us, but let's encourage one another. Let's be prayerful for one another. Let's lift each other up. But again, let's throw some songs in these comment sections on YouTube and on Facebook, and let's spend some time this week using those songs just to push us into a place of worship. Let's open our word. Let's open our prayers. Let's pray long enough where we're done asking and we're sitting there listening. And let's lean on our relationship with God to really grab us and push us through. We really thank God for you all. This season 2, episode 12, the worship mentality. I appreciate you all digging into your lives and sharing great wisdom. And of course, we enjoy these opportunities for you all to peel the layers back and just feed us as leaders in regular casual conversation. Thank you all for tuning into Chatting with the Clays. Mom, Dad, y'all go ahead and sign us off.
I love you, Lord.
And I lift my voice to worship you, oh my soul, rejoice, take joy, my King, in what you hear. Let it be a sweet, sweet sound in your ear.
That's it. That's it. Now that's how you worship, just like that. Thank God for you all. We love you. Please like, subscribe, share, and tune in to next week. God bless you. We love you. And if you haven't already, please go out and vote.
Yes.
God bless. He said it all. You know
He said it all.
He said
God
it all.
bless you.
God bless.
And don't think your vote does not count. Every vote counts.
And put a pin because we're going on. If you don't know the worship song, call and respond song or a gospel song.
Yes, indeed. You got it. God bless you all. We'll see you next week.
My brothers and sisters, I pray that this was a blessing unto you. First Lady Clay, would you like to say anything?
Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell. Leave a comment. God bless.